Excellent. Well, thank you and welcome everybody. Very excited to be here, and let's get right into it. I did choose this slide as an opening, and I think all of our speakers today in the introduction have reiterated that sustainability is a team sport. We don't get anywhere if everybody isn't leaning in. Sustainability is not Francis's job, it's all of ours job. So let's figure out what we're going to do here. And the topic for today is buying the future we want, linking how we spend money, whether as an individual or as an organization, and how that ties into the future that we will get. But let's start off with why is Francis from HP here to tell you about this? And it stems from these two gentlemen, Bill and Dave. They're our founding fathers, actually pictured here in the garage, which is now an historical monument in Silicon Valley. And 80 years ago, they said that the real reason HP exists is not to make a profit, but to make a difference. And for 80 years, we've been hiring people who want to make a difference. Today, it's pretty standard practice that companies are trying to be purpose-driven companies, but we've been doing it for 80 years. Our sustainability strategy has the typical 3 pillars: planet, people, and community, and I won't spend too much time on that. You also heard that we're Canada's most sustainable technology company. And I don't want to go through all of the points on this slide here, but these are the proof points that I used to prove that statement. And you can see it's pretty broad, from being listed as one of the top 100 most sustainable corporations worldwide to how we do ecological landscaping at our head office. So it's as broad and deep as that. So what we're going to cover off today is a little bit about why, and I'm going to use plastics as a really good example of one of the things we needed to be focused on. I'm going to talk about the circular economy, if you haven't heard of that. Hopefully you'll know enough about it to be dangerous by the end of this. I'm going to show you how HP is implementing that, and then why procurement is such an important piece of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon literacy, and then leading it with what you need to do moving forward. So, the estimates are 8 million tons of plastic is leaking into the marine environment every year. And the question is, why is that happening? Let's go here. So, here's a little fact. Most people don't know this or don't think about it, but plastic is made from oil. It's a long-lasting product that is extremely versatile. It's very cheap, and we know oil prices are at historic lows, so if plastic is made from oil, then virgin plastic is going to be cheap. We know it's used everywhere. If you look around where you're sitting today, I guarantee you will see at least one piece of plastic and probably a lot more. We as Canadians have been collecting plastics in our blue bins and the equivalents across the country, and we have been taught for about 30 plus years now that recycling will fix our problems. But if we've been doing this for 30 years and we've got 8 billion tons of plastic ending up in the oceans, obviously something's not working. So we have a little poll here. And the question is, have you ever deliberately bought a product that contained post-consumer recycled plastic? Let's see if Andrew can bring it up. Simple yes or no answer here. And while people are answering that, I will just point those 2 little boxes in the bottom here, SDG 12 and SDG 14. So that stands for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not here to teach you about that today, but if you have any interest in what the UN said about Sustainable Development Goals, we're covering off responsible consumption and production, which is SDG 12, and then life below water, which is SDG 14. So. All right, Andrew, how are we doing in terms of responses?
Pretty good so far. I'll close the poll now. I believe it gives you 20 seconds, so you have 15 seconds now to complete the poll. So please do so. I see a bunch coming in still. So
yeah, we should have probably put a don't know in here. I hadn't thought of that one, but that would have been a good one.
That's true. Well, sometimes giving a yes or no forces the question. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. So we've got a pretty informed audience here, that more people than not, but it's still not as high as it should be, because I'm sure if I ask this question, do you recycle? Everybody would say that they do recycling. And that's part of the problem, that we haven't created a market for those recycled materials. We haven't actually thought about closing that loop. Okay, next slide. Oops, let me go back one. And so let's just think about, why does it matter? If when I ask this question, usually most people are not buying products with recycled content in them. And why is it an important thing to be thinking about? So if we've been recycling for 30 or 40 years, and no one was paying attention to where all the plastics were going, because they were the hard things to recycle, these plastics ended up being shipped offshore, overseas, to where it was cheapest to basically dump them. And there were no standards as to what happened to them. They were just shipped offshore and assumed something good was happening. And of course, what we found out is not very good things were happening. So very few actually got recycled, and there was no demand for them in Canada, so to speak of. So hold that thought, and let's move into a little bit of a broader conversation here. So I often show this slide of 4.75 planets, and the estimate is that if everybody on the planet lived like Canadians, we would need 4.75 planets to support them, and obviously we don't have that. Last year, the UN put out a report that 50% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, which, as you know, are causing climate catastrophe, and 80% of biodiversity or species loss are as a result of the extractive industry. So that's digging for oil, metals, and all the other compounds that we need, and farming. I'm not going to talk about farming because I work in the tech industry, but let's think about what could we do to mitigate those 50% of greenhouse gas emissions and the horrendous species loss that we're experiencing today. So if we want to put some numbers around that, 100 billion tons were dug out of the planet last year. 100 billion tons. And what did we do with that 100 billion tons? For the most part, we dug it out of the ground, we made something with it, we used it, and in some cases for a very short period of time. If you think of a plastic stir stick, milliseconds, and then we throw it back in a hole in the ground called a landfill. And we've always assumed as Canadians, because we were brought up with recycling and reduce, reuse, recycle, that recycling was going to fix these problems. And in fact, what we've discovered globally is that we're actually going in the wrong direction. Less than 10% was actually being recycled, and now we're down to 8.6%. Pretty scary. So the long and the short of it is that we need to do something differently. We can't keep extracting and creating those greenhouse gas emissions and species loss. Otherwise, we'll be killing ourselves eventually. So we do need to think differently. And I call it a buzzword because it's nothing new, really. Circular economy is what our grandparents practiced. So we're trying to drive a different economy, and I'm going to walk you through what that looks like by using HP as an example, because it's a little theoretical otherwise. So HP has made a commitment to take our entire business circular. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So the first thing is that you want to make products. We sell printers and PCs, and we want to make those products that can be maintained and upgraded. And you actually have to deliberately design a product to do that. What we've done through the way we've been buying in the last 80 or so years is we have been buying the cheapest thing that we could afford. And so what that does is that pushes producers to make products that are not repairable, that are not upgradable, and are not designed to be lasting. So you have to make a deliberate decision to change that. Then you want to be able to offer your products as a service, and this involves the whole company changing the way that you deliver your goods to the market. So you're changing from being selling boxes to selling services, and that requires a lot of difference. Then you want to be able to, when a PC, for instance, has reached the end of its first life, you want to be able to give it a second life through reusing and refurbishing. And only then, when you've got the maximum life out of that product, do you want to take it back for recycling. And typically what we've done in Canada through having the recycling programs we have is we've skipped from that first user thing straight to the material recovery phase. So I really want to focus on those inner circles for you to be thinking about today. And I put the picture of the 3D printed heart on the right-hand side here to remind me to talk about 3D printing. So let's just jump into that for a second. The impact of 3D printing, albeit with plastic, is going to have a phenomenal impact. They're actually talking about it being the fourth industrial revolution. It's that big. And you can see here why. Got an example on the left-hand side picture here. You see a traditional aluminum part made for one of our wide format printers. And you can see how much it would weigh. And then if you redesign that part and printed it with a 3D printer, and there's different variations of that, but you end up with something called a topological design on the right-hand side here. This is just showing you from one small piece, you can have a 50% cost reduction, 93% weight reduction using less materials, and a 95% lower carbon footprint. Now think about that for everything that could possibly be substituted with a plastic part. Our 3D printers print about 70% of themselves. And you scale that up across the supply chains that we have for just-in-time manufacturing, it is pretty awesome and huge and is going in the right direction. So the circular economy is really trying to fix a design problem. And it all starts with design. About 70%, maybe even more, of a product's environmental impacts are determined during the design phase. So you want to be thinking about all of these different elements. But the interesting thing for me is that HP in the last 5 to 10 years has actually added social impact into the work that we do from a design perspective. And that might not be a natural thing for you to be thinking about, and I'll show you how that plays out in a moment. So because we've been thinking about this, we were able to make the claim just this year that we actually have the world's most sustainable PC portfolio, and that's based on the number of EPEAT registrations around the world. And EPEAT is an eco-label. Again, I don't have time to talk to you about that today, but if you were interested in how we proved that, because you shouldn't make statements like this without proving it, there's a lot more information behind that. So we have today offered print services, printing as a service, both for business customers and for consumers. We have Instant Ink as a consumer service, and of course, offering PC as a service to larger customers. Instant Ink is the home version of a service-based model, and it's a pretty impressive system because it's good for the customer, good for the business, and good for the planet, which doesn't often happen when you're trying to make changes. So the printer itself is an ink subscription service. The printer orders the ink when you're running out. We ship them to you in a smaller packaging, bigger cartridges, and we put the recycling bag in the box, and we get more cartridges back for recycling, and those cartridges can keep going around in our closed-loop plastics recycling process. And again, here are some of the results of from an environmental standpoint, how much reduction you get just by switching to a service-based model. Pretty impressive. We talked about designing products to be repairable, and that's a deliberate decision, and we are competing in the marketplace with manufacturers who are deliberately not making their products repairable. And you might think, why do people buy products that are not repairable? But it's never been specified in any of the bid documents that I have seen. Changing technology, using advances in technology to significantly lower footprint. I think the overall statement I would say here from a circular economy perspective is that we have the technology we need. We just need to use it. And procurement is the tool that's going to unlock that. And I'd like to use this example. This is a very large machine. You can see there the railings that human beings would be standing on. This is printing newspaper type run printing press. And it's so big, given that we have a commitment to take everything back that we sell, we don't want to take this back because it's too big. So we make this product completely field upgradable so it has no known end of life. And I like to use this slide because we never think like that anymore. Our grandparents bought products that they didn't want to have an end of life, but increasingly over the last 80 years, that's gone away. So this is a change in thinking, and it can be done. It can be done today with a bit of forethought and the procurement people working with us on this. So coming back to plastics, HP has set a goal to use 30% post-consumer recycled plastics across our entire product portfolio by 2025. We don't know how we're going to do this yet, but we're working hard on it. And you might think, well, 30% is not much. Can't you do better than that? if I told you the average in electronic products today, if there's any at all, is about 2%, it shows you that that's a pretty significant investment. And what we've done is we've invested in Canadian know-how for about the last 15 years to make plastics circular. And today in the manufacturing plant in Montreal, we use 1 million used drinking water bottles a day in this process. And I'm going to tell you where we get some of those from in a moment. What we've also done is a lot of analysis on this to see whether it is actually better than using virgin plastic. And it has about a 30% lower carbon footprint along with water and fossil fuel reductions, which are impressive. And we're over 4.2 billion ink cartridges to date manufactured with this process. So this is not a small pilot, this is full-scale production and contributes to the circular economy because we don't have to dig for more oil every time we're able to take some plastic and put it back into the supply. So we got good at doing this, and then some nonprofits in Haiti discovered what we were doing and asked us if we could take ocean-bound plastics from Haiti. So I want to share with you a little video about what we're doing now.
Great, Francis. And is this Rosette story? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, should be seen.
C'est pays lié. Pendant après 12 janvier, nous venons vivre en battante. Il n'y a personne, c'est mon cap. Et c'est mon maman, c'est mon papa. Après, moi, c'est à pour nous battre pour arriver plus devant. Mettez le dans le ballon, me voyez les ça. On va faire plus mouvement, plus passer ça pour nous capables de nettoyer le pays avec Pogina et Navamassia. Moi, je joins tous les petits amis qui viennent maintenant. Maintenant, c'est là-dedans nous payons l'école, là-dedans nous payons caille, c'est là-dedans nous voyons l'école, là-dedans nous faisons tout le bagage net. La vie, je ne devine payer, nous payons qu'à payer caille. Ok, après ça, même dans plastique là, et puis nous venons continuer, moi mettre l'école et puis nous continuer avec. Moi, parce que bon Dieu, moi, je suis capable de intéresser ça que fait, moi intéressé.
So I was just showing you the possibilities of what you can do when you build social impact into your supply chain. And it's a deliberate decision, but it's having a huge impact. So to date, we've used 1.7 million pounds of ocean-bound plastics in ink cartridges, and then we moved into hardware, and we're keeping them out of the ocean. This week, we will actually be having a ribbon-cutting ceremony on a $2 million investment that we're putting in Haiti. It's a wash line to give the waste pickers a higher value for the plastics that they're collecting so that they can sell it on the open market and get more of a living wage. all of the plastics that you saw being collected there are coming to Montreal, where we're using Canadian know-how to make those plastics circular and put them into the following types of products. We've used enough bottles that if you laid them end to end, they would stretch to the moon and back and more, so it's pretty impressive. And these are all the products that you can see ocean-bound plastics going into, and the list keeps expanding, so it's pretty exciting. So I've shown you some small examples of where we are working on the circular economy and how it's possible, and it could be implemented tomorrow if we could all align on it. And last year, a worldwide survey was conducted of CEOs who were aware of the circular economy, and we asked them whether they thought it was key to their success in business. And a pretty high percentage said that they did think it was key to their success, but can you imagine how many are actually doing anything about it? Only 18% are changing their business model. So what's the missing factor here? You've got a high percentage think it's critical to the success of their business, but very few actually implementing anything. There's a missing link here, and what is that? So what will it take to change it? What we need to think about economic transactions, which is procurement, how we buy. Now we need to include social and environmental criteria. This is my favorite quote because it really says, the definition of insanity is, keeping doing the same thing and expecting different results. The way we have been buying to date across all of our organizations and individuals is not focusing on the right things. And if we don't change it, we will continue to reproduce the impacts that we have already today that we know need changing. So what is sustainable procurement? Purchasing the most sustainable services and products from the most sustainable suppliers. And it's both of them. You can't just focus on one thing of the product. You do need to think about the organizations that are supplying it to. So let's have a look at how well we're doing in Canada with sustainable procurement. So I funded some research to be done through Schulich School of Business, and we analyzed 50 public RFPs from federal, provincial, and municipal governments, bids over $1 million for construction, IT, and large services like security or food services. And here are the results of what we found. So this is a very large percentage of our GDP is being spent by governments. It's about 13% of GDP in total. This is our taxpayers' money, and this is how it's being spent. So 78% mentioned the word sustainability in the RFP document, but less than half of them actually put anything about sustainability in the evaluation where it matters. And only 12% actually had it as an independent consideration, and none of them had it in any meaningful way. The questions weren't specific or measurable enough to actually differentiate between the leaders and the laggards in the industry. Now, we know that sustainability is pretty broad. Is it providing decent working, living wages? Is it making sure there's no conflict minerals? Is it ensuring diversity? Is it ensuring low energy use? All of those things. So very broad. So we needed to look at how wide, if they did put something into those bid documents, how many different topic areas did they cover? And what we got to was only one of them actually had 5 or more specific areas of consideration. So this is, a snapshot of public spending today in Canada, and I think if we were to do it for private spending, we would find something very similar. So we're falling far short of where we need to be. So if we think about it for the students on the call here, in business, we use dollars as a proxy for the value that we're getting. But moving forward, the new currency needs to be carbon. And you need to understand what is a carbon footprint, what does carbon neutral mean, and you need to understand what science-based targets for carbon reduction are. So let's have a go with poll number 2. A science-based carbon reduction target is a specific way of making sure that if you are going to do carbon reduction and help alleviate climate catastrophe, you have to do it in a scientific way. You can't just say, well, I think 3% is a good idea or 10%. You actually have to think about what is the world's carbon budget that's left and how much could you be contributing or how much can you lower your contribution. So I'm sure not many people know the answer to this, but let's see if we can get some good guesses going.
Great. I'm going to start closing the poll shortly, which will give them 20 seconds. So close poll, 20 seconds, 19. Ten seconds left.
I feel like there should be do, 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 do.
I know. Wonderful. All right. Poll results. There we go.
All right. Well, most people are, thinking we're somewhere between 56 and 121. The answer is 14. Now think about that. We are in the decade of climate action. We have, as the UN says, 10 years to get climate catastrophe under control, and it's out of control right now. We've got a decade, and only 14 Canadian companies have set targets that are scientific and aiming to reduce. Let that sink in, because that's very serious. I mean, obviously we have companies like HP who are not Canadian-based, who have set science-based targets, but we really need our business community and our governments to step up and do more in this space, and it's pretty scary, I would say. All right. Just need to try and get rid of this from my screen. Here we go. So I'm just trying to give you a little more on carbon literacy. And HP has been we were the first company to publicly disclose our full carbon footprint, including Scope 3. And I believe we're still one of the few tech companies that does this, which is pretty crazy, because we all know that what gets measured gets managed in business. And I just want you to take a look at this bar chart here, because when companies start to work, any organization, when they start to work on becoming a more sustainable organization, the first thing they want to do is they want to focus inside their own organization. And HP is a 55,000 person employee company in, 70 plus countries. But our carbon footprint from all of those employees and all of the work that they do is only 1%. That's only 1% of our total carbon footprint. Roughly 50% of our carbon footprint is in the supply chain, digging stuff out and transporting it and making things. And then 50% is in our customers using our products, which is why I spend so much time talking to customers. And you can see along the bottom here, there are some snapshots of some of the goals that HP has. But what I want you to take away from this graph is the importance of thinking about where you should put your effort. I think by now you're all convinced that you need to be doing things, but I don't want you to be wasting time. We don't have time to work on the small things. We have to work on the big things. We have the technology to fix the problems that we have. We have the concepts of circular economy. We just need to implement them. And I'd encourage all of you to think about where is your carbon footprint from your personal life and then also through into your business and organizational life. And if we took this as an example for Seneca, what goes out of the door on the products and solutions is the brains that the students who leave the college have, and through going through events like this, you are going to be changing the world. That's how Seneca can have the biggest impact, by making sure that sustainability is integrated in every course that is taught. So we used carbon as an example of where the risks are, but that's just looking at one risk. Businesses have to be aware of more than one risk. And here is an example showing you, again, that the operations piece is very small compared to where the risks are typically located, and that's in the supply chain. And this is just showing you there's no particular code to why things are red or blue or how big they are, but the breadth of issues from a sustainability standpoint that have to be considered in the supply chain. And many organizations are only just starting to think about this, and we have to really ramp this up very quickly. And that's why I'm very happy that we've got a lot of supply chain students on the call today, because this is your job, and it's a big job, and you need to get working on it pretty quickly. how do you know how well organizations are doing in their supply chains and in the impacts that they could be having? There is an organization called CDP, formerly Carbon Disclosure Project, that started voluntarily asking businesses to start disclosing. First it was carbon, then it was water, then it was forest, and then it was supply chain, the risks that they have in their supply chain. And you can see here that we have companies who sell printers who don't even disclose their impacts on forests. How can that be? It's because nobody's asking them to. Never mind holding them to account for doing better in their performance of transparency. Without transparency, we can't have sustainability. And transparency is really, really important and not necessarily well practiced today in business. So getting towards the end here, hopefully I have convinced you that thinking about how you buy is important and that we can do a lot better, but you may not know what to do. So I worked with WWF Canada and we produced this guide called Buying Responsibly. It's a very straightforward, simple guide. Anybody in any organization can take this and start to use it. It's got lots of helpful tips. It's a 101 guide. And, you know, it's also got some tips in there about how to create the business case to do a better job on procurement. We also have an HP guide that's specifically for technology, and I am right in the process of updating this, so check back in a month or so and you should have an even more comprehensive document there. If you're also interested in looking at technology and how much carbon it's using, we also have a carbon footprint calculator that's freely available. You can go and play with that. And let's say you wanted to set your all of Seneca's printers to switch themselves off over the weekend, perhaps. You could actually model what the carbon impact of that would be as well as the costs. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to really make an impact. And we started with a slide of the team rowing there. It is about every dollar we spend. And, you might think I'm asking something that's a bit outrageous here, but I think we spend blindly today. And I think if we really want to make a change in the world, this is the simplest place to start by thinking about how we're spending money, not just as an individual, but also in businesses like the college. So I would ask that you think about plastic waste. So that's buying everything with post-consumer, not just recycled content. That's a very different thing. Post-consumer recycled content, and putting that in the requirements for all of your bid documents. Everything you buy has plastic in it today, pretty much. So putting that into all of the requirements, along with asking for the carbon footprint of the services or the goods that you're buying and of the company that's selling them to you. We need to create jobs for the Seneca business and green students, and this would be a fantastic way to create jobs for them because most businesses don't have the literacy in carbon to do this, and they're going to have to hire some students or some fresh graduates to help them do it. So that's a great self-fulfilling prophecy there. And of course, tracking and reporting on this, getting your transparency out there. There's lots of consultants who can help organizations do this, but it is particularly important. I like this quote from Ray Anderson. It's talking about supply chains, of course. If you want to green your own organization, the fastest way to do it is to buy from somebody who's already done it. And I'll leave you with this quote from Dave Packard, that it really is everyone's job, and we all need to lean in and get working on that decade of climate action as fast as possible. And great to know that you now understand the circular economy at its basic level, and you can get started on transitioning what you buy to services and buying with repairability and longevity in mind, and making sure you're not throwing things in a landfill when you're done with them. Okay, Andrew, I think we get to open it up for questions.
Okay, fantastic. So if you do have a question, I think Q&A is open. You are able to type within there, and I think Bill Humber can go through it if everything's working correctly, and can relate those back to Francis. So yes, please write your questions, and we can get right to it.
Let me begin by just saying thank you for that, Francis. That was wonderful. And it's always nice to do it when you have a company that you're working for that is a leader in the field as well. So Is there any way, it's hard to ask this question, but is there anywhere HP can improve? Where would you like to see internally some of those things happen?
Well, we've spent a lot of time working on the doing less bad, and I think it's the time to doing more good. And started to transition to that. We just launched, actually this month, a carbon neutral managed print services service. So you can buy the service of printing that would be carbon neutral today, which is pretty cool. We're getting into forest restoration, not just certified papers and packaging materials, but also actively contributing to proactively protecting forests as well, which is great. But I think, you know, I'm very lucky. We have an amazing team of people at HP, and I get to stand on their shoulders and tell the story. But the work is just amazing around the world of what's going on, and expect some big announcements soon.
Wonderful. How can each person, if you had to highlight 3 things people could do in their life from a personal point of view in terms of their procurement, what would you recommend?
Well, you'd start with the big purchases first, and whittle it down from, you know, what most people will spend the most money on: housing, cars, travel, maybe. You know, start to think about the relative impacts, and you can use carbon as the proxy. Which are the biggest chunks, and where could you start to be reducing them? I was having a big conversation about plastics last week, and I was teaching HP Tunisia had me in talking to their employees about plastics, and we were discussing trying a month of no single-use plastics, which I did a couple of years ago to raise money for WWF. And at one point, I found myself in the supermarket under the produce stall trying to find a plastic bag that was on the ground because I needed some produce that I couldn't carry without a bag, and I had forgotten to bring my reusable produce bags. So my logic was, well, if it's on the ground, it would have been thrown away, so it's not single use. I'm giving it another life, right? But if you just try that, you'll see how much plastic we have in our life, and single use in particular. So first thing is looking at the big purchases and starting to look at the companies who you're choosing to do business with. What are they telling you? And if they're not telling you anything about what they do, particularly in Canada, there's a problem, right? So
let me ask this question, and it's a good question somebody's asked here. How do you incentivize businesses to become participants in becoming more sustainable? If many of them are looking at the bottom line, that can be an apparently selfish perspective. How does one broaden that conversation to show them that it ain't necessarily so?
Well, that's why procurement is so important. Businesses exist to delight our customers. Last year, we had $1.6 billion in business as a direct result of our sustainability leadership. That number makes our board of directors sit up and think about, well, how could we do more of this? This is good for business. And our CEO will tell you today, there is no trade-off between being a leader in sustainability and being a leader in business. They're the same thing today. And our customers expect us to do this, and the way that you drive that is through putting more and harder and deeper and faster requirements into procurement documents, and then businesses will do it. When your customer asks you to do it, you do it. When you can win business because of it, you will do it.
Somebody has asked you to do a commercial, and it's for the new HP Elite Dragonfly laptop.
Oh my gosh!
Can you tell us about that?
This beautiful, beautiful laptop here is the world's first notebook with ocean-bound plastics in it. It has a 24-hour battery life. It won Best in Class at CES, so it's not just an environmental product. It is a fantastic laptop as well. So I just donated one to somebody who'd been doing some volunteer work for me, and she was over the moon about it. Right? It's just, and we know customers are buying it because it has ocean plastics in it. It's not just a little bit less packaging or whatever. They're very excited to see that it has those water bottles coming from Haiti actually right in the product.
On the matter of plastics, another question: are there other materials other than plastic that you're working with at this time in terms of integrating them into your production process?
Well, metal is very easy to recycle. So when you buy metal of any kind, usually there's recycled content in there, so much so that we don't even bother measuring that, but you do know there are recycled metals in there for sure. The other thing that we're really working hard on is the reuse piece, getting more and better programs in place for that. And I would just do a little plug here. There's a program called HP Refresh. Anybody can download this program. And what we've got today globally is a problem with the COVID pandemic. A lot of Chinese factories were shut down, which is where the laptops are being produced. So we're actually in a deficit situation today. If school boards had the money to buy a brand new computer for every student, there wouldn't even be a computer for every student. We don't have the supply right now. But we know school boards don't have the money. So we've got kids who are studying at home, trying to study at home. Some of them are on a phone. Some of them have no technology at all. You might think we're not as badly off in Canada as that we might be in other countries, but that's not true. There is a huge digital divide that existed before COVID. And we know that if a student doesn't graduate high school, all of the socioeconomic indicators go downhill from there. It is so important that we get youth through high school. And if they don't have a computer at home, they're not going to be able to do it today. It's a simple thing. So HP has made freely available some software. And the reason for this is we know, and probably most people on the phone, on the call today, know somebody or actually have one themselves, an older computer sitting around at home or in a cupboard or in a closet at work that they don't know what to do with. And it's just sitting there not being used because they're worried about data privacy or perhaps environmental protection. And they're not going to give it up because they're worried about the data that's on it. So HP's come up with this program called HP Refresh, where you download a piece of software, stick it on a USB key, put it in the older, up to a 10-year-old computer. It will completely wipe it to HP's data privacy standards and then reinstall a Linux operating system, very light operating system, a Chrome browser and a Zoom client, and it's good enough just to get a kid back to school and back to learning. And if we all did that and donated these computers to somebody who needed it, we could help fix this digital divide problem. So there's your challenge.
Yeah. I've just had one student ask, why doesn't Seneca buy more HP product? I can't answer that question. So
well, that's because you do not have a sustainable procurement policy yet.
Well, there you go. There's the first step. That's indeed what we're talking about here, isn't it? What about and somebody has asked the question about you have to package your materials when they're sold. They go in boxes or in your ink goes into containers that have to be shipped to people. How do you address that particular side of the equation?
Yeah, it's really interesting because packaging is something that people get very jazzed up about. But if you look at the relative footprint of packaging compared to the product itself, it's almost nothing. But that doesn't mean you can't stop doing anything. We're doing a lot, actually, where we have a goal to eliminate 75% of single-use plastics in our packaging by 2025. So that's the first thing. We have a zero deforestation goal. Most packaging is made out of paper, and if it's made out of paper, where is that paper coming from? You need to know that it's either highly recycled and recyclable, but also coming from certified sources, so it's not coming from illegally logged tropical rainforests. And I have not seen a lot of companies go at the zero deforestation from a packaging standpoint. They'll do it for selling paper, but not necessarily from a packaging. And we have a commitment to have that complete by the end of this year. So our packaging people are working very hard right now.
Does, and this is another question, does using sustainable materials like post-consumer plastic, how does it affect the retail price of the product? Will it reduce it? Does it add a certain amount? Is it neutral? How do you respond to that one?
Well, we're in a hyper-competitive marketplace with a commoditized product, right? So, we don't have an option to be able to increase the price, but frankly speaking, virgin plastic is very cheap today, and post-consumer recycled plastic costs you money. So we have made a commitment to go with a 30% post-consumer goal, and we will hope that it will bring us business, but we don't have the luxury of being able to increase prices because of it. But it does cost us more, for sure.
Are you doing that program? Now, you had an amazing video about some of the work that's being done in Haiti and the impact that's having on people's lives. Is there similar work being done in other countries that we should be aware of?
So that's always been the big question. And I actually had a non-profit in Vancouver asking me if I could take their ocean plastics that they had collected on the beaches of Vancouver. It's about a supply chain, supply and demand, right? We are a very big user of plastic, and setting up the supply chain takes a lot of cost and resources. Right now, we have enough supply just coming from Haiti at the moment. But if more of our customers were buying with recycled post-consumer ocean-bound plastics in mind, and we're demanding higher percentages, we would have to go and source somewhere else. So it's really, we've proven it can be done. We've shown that it can be done. Now what we need is all of our customers to start specifying more and requiring all of our competitors to do it, and then we'll be able to do even more.
So it's not just a supply, it's a demand question as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Mary Vaughan, our Dean of Business, do you have any specific observations, questions that you'd like to place to Francis? No? Okay. Andrew Wickham, anything further you want to add and comment? I'm sorry, Mary, you're there. That's okay. Just wondering if you have some specific questions for Francis, either from maybe a pedagogical point of view in terms of some of the things we're teaching our students, from a procurement point of view, from the broader college perspective. Take it away.
Thank you, Bill, for that opportunity, and Francis for a great presentation. One of the things that we're working on with our sustainability initiatives are with our supply chain students. And a project that we're working on is with our fashion industry. Mm-hmm. We know that fashion is one of the biggest in terms of the clothing that goes into landfills, it's just absolutely, it's a huge pollutant. And then the carbon emissions that come from the clothing that are sent to the landfills. And even when people think that they're doing the social responsibility, being socially responsible by donating their clothing, only 10% of those clothing actually go to people that are in need, and the 90% are thrown out into landfills. Do you have any idea around what we can do, around this initiative, around this with our supply chain students, and how we can start to develop more sustainable products that people would use, and sourcing those materials? And then how can we build that back into what you talked about was the second life?
Right. So fashion is not an area that I've done much practicing in. I think the neat thing here is that the students are very bright and they're going to come up with some good ideas, right? There's been a lot of nonprofits working in the space of fashion, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a procurement conversation, isn't it? If we want to buy fast fashion, then we will end up with fast fashion issues. I know the quote that always stuck with me was, if you want to know the color of next season's fashion, whatever it's going to be, you go and you look at the color of the rivers in China.
Interesting.
Because they are producing the dyes and they just dump it straight in the river because they have lower environmental controls, I guess. So it's about our personal choices. And I mean, we've seen a lot of the fast fashion industry's been impacted. Le Chateau just went into receivership last week. COVID has shown us that maybe we don't need as much fast fashion. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to practice procurement decisions there.
Thank you.
Maybe, Mary, there's an opportunity here for post-consumer plastic clothing, for a response to this.
Yeah, unfortunately, Bill, there is an issue there, of course, because we know plastic doesn't go away. And what we have discovered is that plastic clothing is actually producing the microfibers that are ending up polluting everywhere. So, I think, within the next 5 years, we'll all be installing filters on our washing machines to capture those fibers.
Yeah. Okay, students, don't consider that idea. Forget that idea. I thought it might have some promise.
Well, but it's all about trade-offs, because if you're buying cotton is a huge pesticide and water user too, right? So you have to know a little bit about, there's no single easy answer, because if it was, we would have done it already. That's the issue, right?
Yeah. Or we would have built in the incentives to do it as well. Let me just see if I can get one more question from our students. Okay, similar to how other brands have called out competitors on their lack of sustainability initiative transparency, would HP ever consider doing this through their advertising efforts? Ooh, there's a pointed question.
Oh,
this is the Coke and Pepsi question, I guess, isn't it?
Well, if you remember the CDP slide that I showed you, I had a lot of pushback from my colleagues to not show that externally.
Right.
And I was bold enough to say, no, it needs to be shown, because that's just a transparency issue. I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying they don't disclose. Why don't they disclose, right? So it's a difficult situation to be in. I want to win business based on my leadership. I don't necessarily, and I'm going to compete every day with my competitors, but I want it to be on more than just a price conversation. That's what I want it to be. So,
yeah. Do you see the cost of post-consumer plastic dropping with far greater use of it, so that it does become competitive?
No, actually what's going to happen is the price will go up. If I'm successful in changing how Canada buys,
right,
and every college in the country put post-consumer plastic requirements into their buying, there won't be enough post-consumer plastic to go around. So the price will go up. But we already have our supply chain sorted out, so we'll have a competitive advantage. That's my plan.
Yeah. Well, I think on behalf of all of us, congratulations to HP. I just looked over at my printer within throwing distance of my hand, and it's an HP. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I felt a little better when I saw that and what we're doing, what I'm doing personally. So that was wonderful. Mary, do you have any kind of concluding thoughts, any observations, any comments for our students that you'd like to leave them with?
I just want to just again to thank Francis, really tying the business practices into the understanding on what impacts we have on climate and on our community. So building in that social impact and social responsibility that our business students need to consider is essential, I believe, in the future of where business grads need to be, and especially when we think about students that are going to be coming out into a post-pandemic world that's going to be very different, and the focus that we're going to be having on the resilient recovery and the green jobs that will be coming out from this initiative. And there's one thing that I've heard my students come back and say when they've been interviewed, I believe one with an ITS at HP, was around, some of their questions were around what are their sustainability values and goals. And it was a business student and an IT student, and neither one of them knew what to say. That's not what I want our business grads to do. I want them to understand the impact that they have, their business decisions have on climate, and to have that confidence and to challenge the status quo and to push past these struggles that we're having, and to be the business leaders that we need them to be.
And kind of adding to that, maybe we should say to our students too, don't be afraid to tell your potential employer what you believe in as well. And you know what, if the answer is so negative that it is in opposite to what you believe, maybe that's not a place you want to work. I know that's hard to say, but you know, it's part of your own maturity as a human being and as a good citizen over time. I'm going to turn it back to Andrew in a minute, but I want to give Francis kind of a last comment, a last observation, a last message to our students and to the rest of us. Francis?
Thank you. And I would echo that comment that work for employers who are willing to learn and grow and work on this with you. There's fewer jobs that have the word sustainability in the title, but they don't need to have sustainability in the title. you can make any job a more sustainable job. And there's 1 billion business decisions made every day in Canada. That's a WWF estimate. And you couldn't even measure the number that actually have real sustainability built into those decisions. It's very, very few. So we've got huge opportunity, and it's ours to take and do. And don't be shy. Just go and make it happen.